Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Jo, lovely to have you on here today.
Hi, Sue.
Jo and I met 3 months ago.
Yeah, back in February.
When we both attended a Speakers Institute free. I think it was a free day, wasn't it, Jo?
Very much free. We like free. Yeah. I arrived late, which is not like me, but I did arrive late. But I thought I had to go because there was something in my little calling telling me I needed to be there on that day. And I'd so been looking forward to see Sam Cawthorne speak for a while. He kept popping up on my Facebook page, so I was determined to get there. So I arrived late, and one of the staff instructed me there was 3 seats available where I could sit, and I quickly scuttled to the front, and there I was and sat next to you, and that's how we met. And I kind of jumped on you and attacked you and introduced myself, and you were quite shocked, and I knew you through various friends of ours, but you didn't know me, so I felt slightly like a stalker, I must admit, but it was very nice to meet you. And we went on from there.
So Jo and I then ended up going to Sydney on a 3-day boot camp, which I think both of us were slightly in trepidation about. And we met at the airport, Jo, didn't we? And we went straight through duty free, determined we were going to buy a few bottles to be left for us when we came back. But upon approaching the gin bar, they were offering free gin. So what happened there, Jo?
Well, we couldn't resist, could we?
So you were trying the blush, which I think was rather lovely, wasn't it? And I was trying a lovely gin made in New Zealand. And then I think the bottles of gin were around about $89 to $99. So we went straight for the Bombay Sapphire, which was $29, and said we'd have a few bottles of those. Then tragically, we had a few hours to spare. So then we ended up at another bar with gin, drinking gin before we got on the plane. And then we had a 3-hour flight to Sydney and arrived to find ourselves lugging these huge suitcases through the streets of Sydney. And finally found our way to the youth hostel right in the centre of the rocks, which I have to say was rather a luxury. And we put our credit card-like little keys straight into the lift and up we went. So it took rather a while. So I assumed we were on floor 23 and floor 39 and 65 and going to have this incredible view when the door opened. And there opens the doors and we suddenly realised we're back at reception. We actually haven't moved at all.
Because apparently we're not very good with key slots.
So in walks a guy with a key, looking quite shocked, because by this stage I think we're on the floor laughing, which tragically actually wasn't from the gin and tonic, because we weren't then still under the effects of it. But anyway, he puts his key into the lift, up we go, and obviously he's desperate to get out. And Jo and I walk to our room, put the keys into our room, and obviously the door doesn't open again. And poor guy, he just happens to be in the room next door. So he puts his key into his door, opens his door, and we look at him and say, "Do you think you can open our door?" And he walks straight into his room and doesn't. So this is how our 3 days in Sydney carried on. We had a great time. But let's start by introducing ourselves first. So Jo, it's great to be with you. We've decided to do some podcasts together because we actually share quite a lot of similarities in our lives. So we're both the mother of 4 children. So there's 8 children between us. And Jo's children are 11, 14, 16 and 18. Jo is an extraordinary and very popular personal trainer in the area. And she has run a number of businesses, including cafes and coffee shops, and also works to empower, as a life coach, empowering women and teenagers to help them find self-love and self-worth. She's really keen to help women stop sabotaging themselves and helping them make good decisions for the future. Jo is also working as a course facilitator, running programs in schools, educating on stress management and the effects of alcohol and drug abuse.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction. That makes me sound very lovely. Well, I'm here with Sue, as you know, also has 4 children, and Sue's children are 15, 17, 19 and 21. Sue has spent 15 years teaching around the world, and after that spent 3 years teaching restorative justice in prisons. And she now has her own business called Teenage Toolbox, which is to address the high teen suicide rates in New Zealand and to empower our youth. So, as we say, both similar, we both got the same passion to help teens and people to be empowered, which is lovely. Sue is also a published author of the book Taken, and which is an international bestseller, which talks about her experiences of the the family court system in the UK and the injustices that happen there, and so her personal experience back in 2004, which is an amazing story, which we will get to on one of our podcasts one day. Sue is also a public speaker and is currently working as a transition strategist, empowering change in individuals' lives. Woo!
Thank you,
Did
Jo.
I say all of those words correctly? Did I pronounce them with my funny accent correctly?
We were talking earlier because Jo said she couldn't actually say the word restorative justice. Interestingly, Jo, I think one thing that really stood out for me when we were in Sydney was Sam Cawthorne said we have to introduce the elephant that's in the room. And so obviously our listeners will want to know why we are called Posh and Pool. And I was actually interviewing my son before we came on to do our own podcast. And he said too that listeners will want to know why Jo is called Pool. So what was the history of introducing the elephant in the room?
Because we were in Sydney, and the course that we were on, by the way, was a public speaking course. We went over there to refine our public speaking skills and to value the art of communication. Anyway, so while we were there, I'm obviously chatting away, talking away, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just me and animated in my way. And obviously I'm up on stage. Well, lots of people apparently enjoyed my accent, which I find incredibly hilarious, and they all wanted to know where I was from.
And so, nobody knew, did they? Nobody recognised where you were from.
Nobody knew. I mean, and a lot of them were Australians in the room, and there was some Kiwis, and there was actually some English people there as well, but obviously I've lived around the world, so my accent may be slightly diluted.
Can I just say, I did know it was a Liverpudlian accent.
Well done you. Even though you are posh, you knew where I was from.
It was kind of north of London, I think, somewhere. I think Liverpool's north of London, isn't it?
It is, well done. It is. So yeah, so that's the elephant in the room, and that's where the pool comes from, because I'm certainly not posh. And what else could we call us? So Posh and Pool just seem like the perfect name, because I'm the girl from Liverpool.
Awesome, thank you, Jo. So it was really interesting, wasn't it? So we were actually watching, I think there was 30 of us in the group, and we were watching different people present on stage. And it was a lovely way to introduce ourselves, because we all feel, we all certainly lack confidence, I think, when we go on stage. And even listening to Benny Brown, who speaks regularly and has done lots of TED Talks, she would even admit today that she feels nervous every time she goes on stage. And I thought, what a lovely way to stop people looking at flaws in our personality or insecurities is just to go on stage and just admit them and put them right out for the audience, shut the door to it, and then start speaking. And I thought it was a lovely way to introduce vulnerability, actually, wasn't it? We're all vulnerable in different ways. We all certainly think we've got different flaws or the things about ourselves we don't like, or we do like but stand out. And I thought it was quite an interesting way to present ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely, and there's many different elephants in the room, isn't there? You know, people got up on stage and did many things, introduced from being different cultures or maybe having different impairments and things. So it was actually just a really nice icebreaker as well, and it made you see the person as more human when they come on stage. Because we say this about people, you know, everybody's got a story.
And certainly we want to go on in some of our podcasts, don't we, and talk about people's stories. And we both agree that everybody's got a story in life. And actually that story, if we come out of victimhood and re-empower ourselves in our story, we might not even like our stories very much. I mean, I've got some stories that I can tell that I don't like very much. But I think once we begin to find self-love, and I think you're very big on self-love, aren't you, Jo?
Yeah.
Then we can accept those things that have happened in our past and use them to empower ourselves and build a story around it to say, okay, well, I actually love who I am now, and I can bring truth and light and love, and therefore I can bring change to lives, which is actually what we want to encourage you guys listening to do, to feel empowered, to realise the beauty of who you are and start to put yourselves out there.
Yeah, and to realise that we all do have a story. We all have many stories, I'm sure. And it doesn't matter if your story seems big or small. And when you listen to other people's story, like this is what I felt when I was in the Speakers Institute as well. There was people getting up on stage with such huge stories that then my ego came in at some page and was like, am I worthy of telling my story? Is because mine's not as big as theirs, but then actually mine was just as big as theirs. All of our stories were just as big as each other's because they happened to you. It's not about size, it's not about significance, it's your story. It teaches you something about yourself. And when you share that story, you say that vulnerability comes in, you show how human you are and the things that you've been through and how maybe facing adversity you come out the other side. But
yeah, it's great. And I think I love what Brené Brown says. She says that vulnerability is the birthplace for creativity, innovation and change. And I think, you know, it's quite frightening to be vulnerable, isn't it? There's two types of vulnerability. One obviously involves abuse, and I just lay that aside at the moment. But when we make ourselves vulnerable for the sake of growing and changing, I think we embark on a really exciting journey of discovery. And I think when we aren't open to being vulnerable or deny there's areas in our life that need to be addressed, then we are basically saying we don't need to grow. And I think Jo and I have both been on a very similar and exciting journey and hard journey, very, very hard journey. And that's why we've come together to empower you guys to go on a journey and just address things that have come up in your life or still are around in your life now, and to say that we are living to grow, to change, and to bring light and love and truth to everyone around us.
Yeah. And Brené Brown explains it beautifully when she's talking about vulnerability, because to be vulnerable you can have the highs and the lows, and we've got to be able to face the lows, but them highs that you can experience when you're in vulnerability are so much more powerful than just living your life in that. People may think it's safe to not be vulnerable, but actually it just cuts off lots of different emotions. And I know personally myself, I live every day in vulnerability now and have done for many years since I discovered self-love, and I've realised I'm worthy and enough and all of these beautiful words that are floating around nowadays, but some people don't really understand what they mean still. But when I live in vulnerability now, the happiness I can feel is so big, it actually fills every cell of my body.
Yeah,
it's so incredible. And don't get me wrong, life is life and it's throwing things at us all the time, and there are lows to deal with, but when we deal with it from a place of vulnerability, we accept that these things are happening. We're not trying to change them, we accept them, and we don't go into victim mode. We don't say why me. What instead we do is we look within ourselves and we say what can we do now. And so we face the lows in vulnerability, but those highs that we get make up for the lows as well.
So what would you say, Jo? Because I'm just thinking back to my greatest time of pain and suffering. And, you know, I want to just address on here today, there'll be people listening that are suffering tragedy and loss. Many women are being abused, and you and I have been in abusive relationships as well. And I think when you feel trapped, you can't get out, you actually feel as there's no hope. So it's all very well doing some work and coming out of that place of desperate darkness, but when you're in that place and it's dark and it's bleak and it's black and you can't actually see any hope at all, you can't see a way to carry on, what would you say to listeners today who are in that place?
Gosh, it's like when you're describing that, it just paints so many pictures, doesn't it? It makes you go back to where you were at that time. If you can, reach out. And there's always somebody to reach out to. Like myself, when I was in an abusive relationship, I went and knocked on the doors of a helpline. You know, I went to a Living Without Violence place because I needed some help. I knew I couldn't get it from my friends necessarily because I didn't feel ready to admit to them what I was going through. So I reached out to somebody that I know would be able to help me. And there is always help out there, and it doesn't matter how dark it is for you, it doesn't matter how bleak it is, there is always help out there.
Yeah, and I think looking back, we could probably both honestly put our hands on our hearts and say, actually somebody always came at the most desperate time, or there was an email, or there was some food, or there was just a lady in the street that smiled and you wanted to go and knock on her sort of front door and say, do you realise when you smiled you actually saved my day today, because that's all I needed. And you wanted to hug that person that smiled to you but you'd never met before, but that some it's almost like angels just suddenly appear out of nowhere. But I think that's really good advice, that if you don't feel safe or confident yet to tell your story because you think people won't believe you or you're not ready to make yourself vulnerable, then to call out to a helpline. Because I think at those desperate times when there's other voices speaking in our head of worthlessness and self-hatred and hopelessness, is to find or hear another voice that speaks something more powerful.
Yeah.
Even if it's somebody you don't know.
Absolutely. And there is always help out there. There's always help. And it's just finding that help. And then all that we do need, you're right, all that we do need sometimes is that one tiny little spark, that one tiny little seed planted. And once that seed's been planted, it grows and it flourishes and it can turn into something much bigger. But you just need to get on that road, and whichever pathway you take, but always, you know, no matter what the desperate situation is, because both you and I have been in desperate situations, and look at us now, full of fun and hilarity, and we
being able to actually laugh again is such a joy, isn't it? And there will, you know, it will come. That's the thing. There's a bigger picture than the one you know. If you're in a place of suffering right now, and certainly if you're in domestic abuse, there is hope. And there's a bigger picture than the one you know. And it's interesting because I was blogging this morning on finding self-love, and somebody messaged me and said, it's all very well, Sue, but I'm in a place where my partner and my friends don't believe in me. And I just wrote back to her and I said, then you believe in yourself. We actually don't need other people to believe in us. I said, I actually see you like a star that's shining. And I said, stars don't shine because the other stars say to them, you need to shine today or you're looking good. Stars just shine. And I said to her, you can speak words of affirmation over your own life. I am worthy. I am lovable. I love myself, and I'm going to find a way. It seems right now there's no hope, but this is going to actually build me into a stronger person, and I'm actually going to use my story to empower not only myself but change lives. And I'm going to fight, and I'm going to get out there and make something of myself when nobody believes in me. It's actually going to be the platform on which I believe in myself, I think.
And this is exactly why you and I both work with teenagers right now, to empower them. We want to give them that knowledge that actually self-love, self-worth, self-belief is where to go. You know, we know searching for happiness doesn't happen outside. It happens within. And this is why, I mean, I love working with men, women. I love working with people of all ages to help them find this. But it really, really fills my heart with joy to work with these teenagers, to know that once they know that if they love themselves and they can believe in themselves, that it's their life they decide. They can make the choices from a place from within their heart. And it's so empowering for them. I just love it.
So empowering. I totally agree. But do you think it's harder? I mean, talking about teenagers, do you think it's harder for teenagers growing up now with the whole social media scene and self-image than it was when we were growing up?
Yes, I do. Because it's much more in your face now. I mean, we had our own issues when we were growing up, you know, and the same issues are still around. There's still bullying, there's still nastiness, there's still comparison, but they are tenfold, you know, they're in your face way more. And bullying can happen online. You can be a keyboard warrior. You don't even have to do it in the playground anymore. When you're pulling somebody's hair, you can just actually say nasty words over social media, and people don't understand how powerful words are and how much they wound, you know. And when I was in a domestic abusive relationship, I wanted him to punch me in the face rather than say the words to me. That's how bad it got.
Yes, because you wanted somebody to see the bruises, because nobody sees the pain, do they?
Absolutely.
And it's a hidden pain.
Yeah, and it's awful. And then with social media, you know, the comparison for our young people, they think these people have these perfect lives. They think having 500 likes on Instagram makes them likeable. Again, they're looking without and they're not looking within.
Isn't it interesting? Because, you know, at the age we're at right now, I can honestly say I don't know anybody with a perfect life. I've never yet in my whole life come across anybody with a perfect life.
And it's so good to embrace being imperfect.
Yes.
I love that song. Is it by Anne-Marie and stuff or something?
Yeah.
It's I can't think of the words now, but it's about loving yourself, being imperfect and everything.
Yes. I have to say though, I have to be really honest, doing our first podcast, is that I'm really grateful it's not video as well. Because I think I would have had to do my hair and my makeup. But I was watching somebody doing a webinar yesterday, and she said that she had comments from somebody that said, "You've got grey hair and I think you look much older than you are," and it was pretty nasty comments. And she did a really good response, which was a recorded response, and she said, actually, I've been diagnosed with a genetic disorder, which means I'm not going to live beyond 60. I don't have as many years as the average person to live. My husband loves me as I am, grey hair and all, and I've made a decision. I'm not going to dye my hair, but I'm actually going to love myself with grey hair. And she said, look at my chin, it sticks out. Look at the lump on my nose that's not meant to be there. And look at this wrinkles down the side. But she said, I love who I am, whether I've got wrinkles, grey hair, sticky out chin or lump on my nose. And I just thought, good for you. And she said, life is too short to waste sitting online writing comments or even noticing people's grey hair and sticky out chin.
Absolutely. And when you come from a place of loving yourself, you are much less critical about other people.
Yes.
Because you don't want to see that in them either, because you've come to a place of self-acceptance, of loving you, then you just love other people for who they are. And you're right, who cares about all of that? And why should we care? Because there is no such thing as perfect. I'm not even too sure how the word perfect exists because there's no such thing as perfect. You're never going to get the perfectly made bed. You're never going to get the perfectly made cake. There's always going to be somebody or something that is not going to like it.
You're certainly not going to get the tidy house when you've got 8 children between you, are you?
Absolutely not.
Trying to run a business and feed children and put food on the table.
And no, there's no such thing as being perfect. And I did used to be. I had rushing women syndrome. I was that woman who was trying to be perfect, bring up 4 young children, run 2 businesses at the same time, take my children to extracurricular activities while wearing nice clothes, while trying to keep fit and get up at 6 a.m. and do a run. Oh my goodness, my life
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. There's no such being perfect. Just be an imperfect mess and love yourself regardless.
And it's interesting because my eldest 2 children have now left home. My eldest is in England joining the Navy, and my second is at university down in Wellington. And you realise how quickly those years go. You know, I had 4 young children and we used to have lots of adventures together, and now I'm down to 2. And you just think, gosh, did I enjoy all those years? Did I make the most of actually being with them? And so now's my chance to really enjoy every minute of being with my last 2 children and think, the washing up can wait, the hoovering can wait, and actually we'll go without food tonight.
Absolutely.
Just to have a bit of fun and walk on the beach, which we can obviously do here because we live in such a beautiful place.
Yeah, no, I am definitely that host when people come around for dinner. Sometimes I forget to feed them because we might be ploughing them with wine or dancing around the kitchen.
And having a lovely time.
Oh gosh, I forgot to serve the food. What a shame. But people come to my house because they love it and we all have fun. There's no such thing as being perfect.
And there's no rules, are there? There's actually no rules in life. And I think that's probably hard for teenagers because, you know, when you're at school for all those years, you have to conform to establishment rules and a system. And then how long does it take when you come into life and think, actually, there are no rules and I can reinvent myself and I don't even have to abide by rules of an institution I'm working for. I can think for myself, think outside the box and be slightly more creative than the average person.
Absolutely.
So I did mention that we can walk for beaches. So neither of us live in England, do we, Jo?
No, we don't live in England
Just
anymore.
speaking, introducing where we live. Where do we live then?
We live in a beautiful place called Devonport in Auckland, New Zealand. We are blessed. I'm grateful every day to live here. It's fabulous. It's beautiful. We have the most amazing beaches.
And you came to New Zealand how many years ago?
I've been here about 12 and a half years now.
So how many of your children were born here then?
Just one.
One of your children was born here.
3 very little children on the plane.
And it's a lovely place to be with small children, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a
amazing.
fantastic place to be. So I've been here for 8 years. We came for 2 years just for an adventure. And I thought I'd teach for 2 years, but then your children get so embedded in life. And I think sport's a great opportunity in New Zealand, isn't it? There's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful. But we do miss England as well.
We do miss England, and when you live in another country, you always have your heart in 2 places, don't you? That's just how it is.
Yes, you do, because you've got family and friends that you miss.
And we never forget our roots, and it's what's made us, and it's part of our story, and it will be some of the lovely things that come out in future podcasts.
But actually, aren't we lucky that we can live somewhere differently? We've got that freedom, and as you know, I know really well, is that we make the most of every day. No matter where we are, we find wonderful friends and we find ourselves wherever we are.
And we've realised the world is a much smaller place than what we once thought.
Yes. So we were going to just briefly talk about 3 different things before we close. 1 was story, 2 was vulnerability, and 3 was connection. So Jo, did you want to just say a little bit about story?
Yep. So obviously Sue and I met through a Speakers Institute boot camp and the experience we came on, and we walked into the room and there was, say, 25, 30 other people on the course with us, you walk in, and even though I no longer judge people, I really am very conscious about that. You still walk in the room and you think, oh, I think I might like that person, or I might get on well with that person a bit more than another person. We've probably got things in common. But actually, I just opened myself totally, which I know you're getting onto vulnerability next to, but I thought, no, I'm going to be totally vulnerable in this situation. It's obviously quite nervous. But just be really open as well. And of all of those people that we met, each and every one of them was beautiful from the inside out. They all had a story to tell. And it just really opened our eyes, didn't it, when we went out for dinner one night and we looked around in a bar and we just thought, every single person in here has got a story. Every person. So just, be aware of that with every person you meet in life. If they're having a grumpy day, if they're having a great day, try not to judge, try not to be too...
Because that might be a manifestation of the pain that they're going through, the suffering.
They could be in pain, or something could have happened to them that day. Let's not judge other people, and let's not let it affect us either if they are grumpy or sad. Try to just spread kindness and happiness wherever you go, and be aware that everybody has got a story. You have got no idea what goes on within people or behind closed doors, because them 3 days that we were in that room when we were all sharing our stories, some most powerful, amazing stories came out. And when we first walked into that room, we would never have guessed that those stories were going to come out. And even the stories we shared, others were shocked at our story also, which to us, it's just our story.
Yeah.
It's just who we are, and we're quite okay about it, and we're quite complacent sometimes, but everybody has a story, and it makes each and every person enriched and really interesting.
And it does. And I think I'm writing one of my latest books is about the power of change in people's lives, and I say the one thing that never changes is that things that are always changing. And if things are always changing, then we have to come to terms with loss. Mm-hmm. And in loss, there's grief. Mm-hmm. And in grief, there's suffering and there's pain. We face adversity and conflict, whether it's change of jobs, whether it's children leaving home, empty nest syndrome, teenagers growing up, whether it's suffering through sickness. And I think I got a client one day to write a little exercise each day, was to say how many times in a day she felt she suffered, or felt she could tell a story about the builders arriving next door and parking in front of the driveway in her response to it, or when she went down to the supermarket and forgot her shopping bags. Stories are happening all the day, every day, aren't they, to us?
Absolutely.
Stories are happening every minute of every day. So if we put our stories together in a week, and then we put our stories together in a month, and we have a look at the stories that have happened to us in the last year, we have many, many, many stories. But I think in particular, we can all speak about something that has drastically influenced our lives. The split up of parents when we were young, relationships that have failed, jobs that didn't work out, career moves, different directions. And I think story really makes us who we are. That's the critical key. It's not that we become victim to our circumstances. And I think that's one way of looking at life, isn't it? Yeah. We can be a victim to our circumstances. Woe is me, and if this hadn't happened to me, if my husband hadn't have left, if I'd have had more money. But actually, what I've learnt to do is to turn that around and to say, I wouldn't be the person I am today without the lessons I've learnt because of it. Absolutely. And I wouldn't swap any of it. So going on to vulnerability, as I say, I will make it really clear I didn't want to do this by video. I was quite happy to do audio but not video. Maybe we'll go live at some stage.
We will.
But we, in stepping out of our comfort zone, can learn and we can grow. And I think my heart really at the moment is for women that are in abusive relationships, because you are incredibly vulnerable. And it is saying, I personally understand your story. I understand where you're coming from. I've published a book about what it was like to go through the family courts in England. And because of it, that book's now an international bestseller. I have thousands of women actually every month contacting me about their stories of hopelessness. And I would just say, push on through. Don't give up. Some people that I'm in contact with are actually, they've been sectioned. They're in mental institutions because they don't want to abide by the rules of the court, which they feel are harming their children. And I say, even if you're in a mental institution, Write the chapters of your book in there. See it as time out to write your book. See it as time out to tell your story. And use everything. Don't ever waste an opportunity. Don't ever think there's hopelessness there, because there never is. There's always light. There's always hope. And certainly Jo and I are right behind you, supporting you.
Yeah. And vulnerability is just such a beautiful place as well. And when you watch people be and come from a place of vulnerability, it's just more authentic. It's
and
more
real.
raw, yeah, raw, real. Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, you get the highs, but you get the lows. But you're coming from a place of trust as well. You're trusting something bigger than who you are.
Yeah. And it's hard to do, though, isn't it? Trust is really hard. I love the scripture in the Bible which says faith is substance of things hoped for and evidence of things not seen. And trust is actually stepping into faith, isn't it? Trust is stepping into what you can't see and not hoping there's something better, but knowing there's something better and actually speaking that better thing into your life. So if you're in a place right now that's dark, try and visualize the light and speak that light is coming. Or if you're in financial hardship, speak that money's coming your way this year and it's coming in, and that you're going to live as though the money's going to come in and that you can draw it into your life.
And this may sound all like a little bit woo-woo to some listeners, and you may be thinking, oh yeah, whatever, and it's not easy. We have both been on very various paths, and over the next several weeks we'll be interviewing different people and stories will come out. But coming from a place of vulnerability, it takes practice, it takes a bit of hard work, but once you're there, it's a really, really beautiful place to live from.
And what about connection, Jo? Do you think connection's quite important in that place?
I think we are only here for two things in the world. I think love and connection is what we're here for. Connection is everything. And when you connect on a really deep level with people, so not on a surface level, there is so much surface stuff happening out there. You think you have so many friends, and obviously our teenagers are dealing with all of this kind of stuff. Oh, my friend's been mean, or this has happened. They are not fully connected. When you do actually have deep and meaningful connections with people that are really authentic, filled with integrity, I think it just gives you so much warmth inside you. It makes you walk taller, makes you feel stronger. It's
so empowering, isn't
Absolutely.
it? So empowering to have good friends around. I think, one of the biggest lessons I learned was I had a really close group of friends, actually. And then when my husband left, all those friends walked away. And I felt as though I was so alone in the world. Loneliness crippled me. Yeah. And I wondered why so many friends walked away. But then what happened, and this might encourage some of you, is that the most extraordinary people came into my life. I mean, really extraordinary. People that loved without needing to say anything. People that brought me things because they felt what I was going through, but they didn't need to mention a word. They dropped something on my doorstep. I had money coming through the letterbox. Sometimes I didn't know who it was from. There is such love out there. And I think when you are feeling lonely, you connect with the source of the universe in a much deeper way. Yeah. And I would never go back now and change anything because of what I experienced at the time in terms of provision from the universe coming in, and I felt this power of a love I had never known. I knew my mother's love, I knew my father's love, I had a great upbringing, a happy home, but I didn't understand the power of that unconditional love of supply that comes in. And it's mind-blowing, and that teaches you a lot about yourself, doesn't it? That Absolutely. You're not actually alone.
Absolutely. And I had a very similar experience when I left my first husband. When our marriage broke down, I basically lost my entire friendship group. Here I am in this new country. I wasn't like I could go running back to family and oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And obviously the journey's continued that since then. That was like 6.5, 7 years ago. But here I find myself now, and I have the deepest connections I've ever had with people. I meet people who are on a similar path to me, and the giving is given without any expectation. I give without expectation. My friends or the beautiful people in my life give without expectation. It's just done from a place of soul, from a place of heart, and it's just...
Giving is quite critical, isn't it? Giving, that I think I hadn't realised how critical giving is. And somebody said to me at my lowest point, Sue, what is it you need? Think about the area of need you have, whether it's finances, whether it's love, whether it's time, whether it's healing, and actually go and give away that very thing you need to somebody else. Yeah. And I remember my children they were abducted twice. That's another story we'll go through some other time. But they came back through the family court about 4 days before Christmas, and I had no money. They were all under 5, 4 children under 5, including a newborn baby. And we had no money for food. We had no money for presents, for Christmas tree or anything. And I remember just feeling so alone, and all I heard was just give more away. And I had about £2 in my purse. Mm-hmm. And I went and gave those £2 away. And the next day, we had a Tesco internet delivery arrive on our doorstep. I didn't know who it was from, but it was not just a normal delivery. It was to fill the whole freezer. It was bottles of wine. It was chocolates. It was Christmas crackers. It was extravagance. And then somebody knocked on the door and said, "I bought your Christmas tree." Oh. And an old lady who lived a couple of streets away, she was running a children's charity, and she knocked on the door and said, "I've got Christmas presents to put around the tree for all 4 children." Big, huge boxes wrapped up. And so much love came. And it was a day after I gave away everything I felt. I had £2, which wouldn't have bought a pint of milk at the time. And the very next day, and that's happened to me so many times since. Give away time, give away your love, and it comes back in abundance.
It does, absolutely. And the one thing that we can always do is give. We can always give, and it doesn't have to cost money. It can be a smile. It can be talking to the person, the checkout operator at the supermarket, to let them know that they have been seen.
Yeah.
It can
Making
be
eye contact.
Yeah,
and as you say, a smile is so important, isn't it?
Give away
Look
your smiles.
into somebody's eyes and smile. And when you say thank you, show gratitude by actually gazing in their eyes and actually holding that eye contact, or even using somebody's name as you say thank you or say goodbye. Absolutely. It's really powerful.
We can give all the time, like you say, give what you can.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of purpose as well, and it actually makes you feel better. And actually, this is another podcast. We're running out of time, but research shows us that by giving, it just makes us happier people. Giving makes us happier.
So, Jo, we're going to be running a series of podcasts, aren't we? We've got some really exciting people we want to interview to bring all sorts of different topics to the table. But before we close today, is there a final giveaway you'd like to just put out there before we close?
No, I think we should just both say our mission statement so people really understand why we are here. And so really the whole point of this podcast is to come from a place of love, and my mission is for every man, woman and child to feel beautiful, empowered and worthy of love. So I'm hoping that over the coming weeks, months, years, that our podcasts give people that hope and that knowledge, and we will be having I'm sure there'll be much hilarity, there will be some tears, there will be some hard conversations to have.
We've had all that between us so far, haven't we?
Absolutely, and tons of it. And I just think the people that we have on will be inspirational. There will always be a story. There will always be vulnerability, and there will always be connection.
Thank you, Jo. That's lovely. And closing, I think I'd just maybe put my mission statement out there, which is to inspire every individual to live passionately, to love louder, and to lead with passion. So thank you so much for joining us today on Pods with Posh and Pool.
See you next time.
Thank you, Jo.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.